Ahsoka episode 5 just dropped and we have a ton to talk about. I've got to say, I wasn't surprised by a lot that happened in this episode, but I really enjoyed it. Right off the bat, was this my favorite episode of this series? No, I still preferred episode 4, and that largely comes down to the fact that that episode felt so well crafted, so perfectly shot and timed. There were, I think, some small issues with this episode, nothing that majorly detracted from what we got, but which didn't elevate it to the same level. That being said, and of course, full spoilers here, I was really impressed by the look of Anakin Skywalker through 95% of this episode. I was a little bit worried based on what we got at the end of episode 4 that he might look a little bit wonky, but I thought he only got better as the episode went on, which I was genuinely surprised by. Obviously, this episode can be divided into two real segments, one in the world between worlds, the other in the real world, including the final moments of the episode, which I absolutely adored. But let's talk about the world between worlds, because that's what everyone's going to be talking about. That's what you guys probably want to hear my opinion on. I gotta say, great to see Anakin back. Obviously, we saw him a little bit at the end of the last episode, but I thought Hayden did a great job in the role, and I thought the standout was actually Clone Wars era Hayden. He worked well with young Ahsoka, who also looked really cool, and I tweeted right as it came out, we need a live-action Clone Wars series. I know some of you will say, heck, that is just the prequels. Yes, but let's get some more of it. I think sort of my main complaint with the flashbacks, however, was I don't really know what the point was. Like, yes, part of it was that Ahsoka has to keep fighting. She can't just fall into the ocean and die, but I mean, that's kind of a truism at this point in Star Wars. I was looking for a deeper message. Talking to some of my friends, I was talking to Corey, he sort of suggested the idea that it's really about how Ahsoka is training Sabine, how Anakin made mistakes with Ahsoka, sort of forcing her into this warrior role. Maybe Ahsoka is doing the same thing to Sabine. I get that idea, but I don't necessarily feel like it was executed well, and I think they really could have done an even better job with the world between worlds aspect had they focused more on just one big thematic thing. It almost seemed like they wanted to get in sort of Ahsoka's general melancholy, which at times has infected, and not in a bad way, her performances in this series. Like, you could tell that she feels a sense of loss based on everything she's went through, and I feel like if that was the point, they could have focused more on her sort of being absent for Anakin's fall. Now, that was something we saw in Star Wars Rebels, but I think her coming to terms with it again could have been nice. I think the end, the final fight between her and Anakin with her line, "I choose to live," is sort of illustrative of what they were going for, but I thought the execution could have been a little bit better. That being said, the spectacle of it was all really great. I love to see Rex. No surprise, they nailed him. I kind of wanted to complain a little bit about how they made the sets or the sequences for the flashbacks during the Battle of Ryloth and Mandalore. Like, they were very foggy. It almost reminded me of the Battle of Mimban from Solo, but I don't really think it makes sense to complain about that when it was probably meant to represent the fact that she's kind of in the past, she's in a memory here, and it was also kind of evocative of that original fight scene between the clones and the battle droids from episode 2. But the walkers in the background look great. I just kind of wish we could have got a bit more sense of scale instead of just people running off into the dust and whatever else. But I'm nitpicking. Overall, pretty cool. A lot of the imagery, including Ahsoka sort of disappearing and emerging into the water, reminded me of some of the concept art that was going to be used for episode 7, where it would have been sand instead of water. But moving on, I thought the planet of Cetos continued to steal the show. Just such a visually interesting planet, very different than what we normally get in Star Wars. The Ghost flying around just looked amazing. Chopper and Jason, even with his goofy ass green hair. You know, I don't like the look of the character. Blame that on my much loved Rebels, but as a character, he's becoming very interesting. But yeah, back to visually, this remains just presentation wise generally, because I'm going to include music from the Kiners, the closest we've got to a Star Wars movie on the small screen, and that's just great. Probably my favorite part of this episode was the entire entire vibe when Ahsoka reemerged. And I guess, hey, I was criticizing some of the thematic developments, but it paid off. Not only was she, garbed in her very cozy looking Ahsoka the White outfit, but as she's flying through the clouds and the sun is coming in, you did get a feeling of rebirth, which I thought worked really well. For a part 5, when we know something very dark is, if not yet on its way, soon to be, this had almost a very warm and positive feeling, which I thought was interesting after the end of last episode. And that culminated, of course, with the very end, finding the star whales, the Purgle. Obviously, we then have the Jonah and the whale, and if you're a theologist, you could probably talk about the meaning behind that analogy, but just great. And the rebirth of Ahsoka was contrasted nicely with Anakin flickering back and forth between Darth Vader and himself. As a side note, I would really at some point like to see them use Sebastian Shaw or some older version of the redeemed Anakin, maybe switching between Anakin as he would have been redeemed at the time of his death versus Clone Wars Anakin. It's probably never going to happen, but I don't know, I think it could be nice. Like, people forget, Anakin returned to the light side as a grown man, as a father, and I think that's something that's not maybe brought up enough. But I do think we will see Anakin return at some point, whether it's in this season of Ahsoka, season 2, the eventual movie. I think he's coming back. He's too important to not only Ahsoka's life, but obviously just everything Star Wars related. Another thing we got in this episode was the continuation of the New Republic dumb storyline, Mon Mothma even getting forced into it, and again, a la Thrawn trilogy, we see that our heroes, in this case Princess Leia, are still trying to do what's pragmatic and what's right, despite the obvious bureaucracy and the fact that they're being stonewalled by some unhelpful elements within the government. It was interesting to see even Mon Mothma being caught up into that. I do still think at some level it's kind of dumb. Like, they saw a massive ship being built that was powered by several Super Star Destroyer engines. I think it's probably worth getting the fleet over there at that point, and that you can probably justify your, time off work. But those are my thoughts on the episode. I thought it was great. Probably my second favorite of the season, maybe my third. Just great though. I'm so happy to have a show back that people are pretty much uniformly behind, and it's just great to have season 5 of Star Wars Rebels. Let me know your thoughts though on this and more down below.